The status quo, we are now 15 years after the so-called Thessaloniki Promise. In 2003 there was a summit in Thessaloniki and EU leaders gave a promise to West Balkan countries that their future will be within the European Union. What is the situation at the moment? Here we have the countries from former Yugoslavia plus Albania, and we see in the northwest that Slovenia, Croatia have become EU members. And next, so to speak, in the row are the dark green countries here, Serbia and Montenegro. They are basically candidate countries and they are already involved in membership talks. For instance, out of the 35 chapters, Montenegro has opened 30, of which 3 are preliminary closed. Serbia has opened 12, of which 2 are preliminarily closed. Next come Macedonia and Albania. They are just simply candidate countries, but they are not yet in membership talks. Particularly Macedonia is for quite a while already a candidate country. As you know, there are specific problems with Greece and concerning the name dispute of the name of the country Macedonia. And finally, we have the 2 light green countries, Bosnia and Kosovo. They are, so to speak, potential candidate countries. However, Bosnia has submitted an application for candidate status, and Kosovo has this stabilization and association agreement in force, which is comparable to the Europe agreements that the Central European countries had before they entered the Union. What was the EU's strategy dealing with the Western Balkans so far? In our interpretation, this was the attempt to have stability in the region via connectivity. And it was a 2-pillar strategy. I tried to make this funny like house with these 2 pillars, and that was connectivity in 2 ways. On the one hand, in terms of trade, and on the other hand, in terms of basically physical connecting the countries, in terms of transport infrastructure, road, rail, but also energy networks. The EU would support these types of connectivity, and the hope was then that in a way an invisible economic hand would guide the political hand that would then lead to regional cooperation, and there would be some kind of an automatic way in which then these countries would sooner or later enter EU accession process. However, it seems that in the end this regional cooperation did not evolve in such a way as it was hoped for. Nevertheless, let us have a look at how the 2 pillars of the strategy so far actually worked. Well, in terms of trade liberalization, one could say that it was fairly successful. All the countries on average have increased their export share since 2001. Basically, they doubled it. And 2 important events occurred. In the year 2000, the EU granted basically tariff-free exports into the Union. And in the year 2007, there was a regional trade agreement, the so-called CEFTA, Central European Free Trade Agreement, that reduced massively tariffs within the region. So it appears that this was probably rather successful, and especially in Macedonia, Serbia, Bosnia, here at the top, we see that these countries are having now export shares which are closer to the ones we observe in Central European economies. The other pillar, infrastructure. Well, the infrastructural deficit is still quite massive. We have here estimates that look at the next 5 years. Annually, there would be an infrastructure investment need of about 10% of GDP. It's not only replacement and maintenance, but also a lot of catch-up investment necessary in order to particularly improve transport infrastructure. So this is annually the needs. EU support in comparison per annum terms from the 3 main EU support programs, the IPA pre-accession funds and the Western Balkan investment framework grants. These are the blue bits here. And the European Investment Bank loans, these are the yellow bits here, make up together, well, somewhere around 2% of the GDP of these economies. If you compare this, for instance, to the transfers that the Central European EU member countries receive, that's at the lower end. Yeah? So they would receive up to 4, in some years, maybe even 5% of GDP in terms of transfers. So there is something to be gained if you become member of the European Union, definitely. So let's say in terms of infrastructure, we have a mixed picture. Now we believe that the Union has actually a new strategy towards the Western Balkans. We would call it politics and security first strategy. Earlier in this year, the EU published actually a new strategy paper called Credible Enlargement Perspective for this region. De facto, we think that the Union has already started quite some time ago to change a bit the focus of their strategy. And it's again 2 pillars. One, or actually these are now pyramids here. One would be improving the rule of law, fundamental rights, generally governance issues, one might say. And here to the right side, a crucial issue, solving border issues. And the EU would see itself as a mediator in these processes, both for internal problems of the countries. So, for instance, after the elections in Macedonia, the EU tried to mediate, but also regarding the border issues. So, the EU is mediating also between Serbia and Kosovo, for instance. So this is a more political and security focus in the EU's strategy more recently. Let us have a look at where we stand, for instance, in this first pyramid, the governance issues. We have here data from the worldwide governance indicators, and we tried to compare the latest data point from 2016 with the average of Bulgaria, Croatia, and Romania in the year of their accession to the Union. Yeah? So that would be 100%. And for instance, here we have the frontrunner Montenegro in various categories of these indicators, and it is always below that level that Bulgaria, Croatia, Romania had upon their accession, although it comes close, for instance, in government effectiveness, control of corruption, believe it or not. This is the World Bank indicators. But it has less so in, let's say, voice and accountability, political stability, regulatory quality. Now, this is the front runner. If we take the next group, Serbia, Albania, Macedonia, they're almost everywhere below this. And the last group here, the gray ones, Kosovo, Bosnia, they're maybe only at half of the level that Bulgaria, Croatia, Romania had upon their accession. On average, let's say about 1/3 of the way is still to go for the Western Balkans in terms of broad governance indicators. Now, we tried to actually calculate how long it would take these countries to actually bridge the gap, assuming that they have the speed that Bulgaria, Croatia and Romania had 80 years before their accession to the Union, or even their own speed if that is quicker than what Bulgaria, Croatia, Romania had. Why 8 years? Well, because the Commission suggested as an indicative date of accession the year 2025. So the blue bar would be this baseline scenario, and we see that basically none of these countries would be able, let's say realistically, to bridge this gap on average across all these governance indicators in 8 years. So it's rather something like 10, 15, even 20 years. Now, there could be the case that maybe there would be something like a democratization jump. Partly we see this improvement, for instance, in the political system in Macedonia, which came in a way quickly. So one could, in the very optimistic scenario, hope that, for instance, in these indicators, voice and accountability, political stability, that there would be quick changes. So taking out these two sub-indicators, we get the yellow bar. And in that case, Montenegro would be actually really able to come close to that level that Bulgaria, Croatia and Romania had upon their accession. The others would still need about 10 years. So that would be approximately the time period. The other pyramid was the security pyramid. And here, I already mentioned, the EU tries to really be supportive, actively supportive in reconciliation processes. We have here on the left-hand side a map of potential and actual political crisis hotspots, very much related to the ethnic fragmental areas in the region. And so there are really a number of problematic cases. And we have here on the right side, for instance, the recent tour map of President Juncker around all these countries. And we have also Mr. Hahn, who is traveling around the region on a regular basis, and other EU representatives. And we have, as an example, a very concrete one, Mrs. Mogherini, that really takes representatives from Serbia and Kosovo in Brussels, in this so-called Brussels process, to one table, trying to broker an agreement between these two. And in a way, one could argue that infrastructure, support for infrastructure investment might be increasingly seen actually as a benefit rather than a normalization instrument. Now let me somehow have a look into the future with this graphically different slide than what we tend to present normally. Basically, the two extremes would be a so-called Balkan regatta on the one hand, and on the other hand, a Balkan Express. Yeah? So on the left-hand side, this blue regatta figure would be the official position of the Commission. So officially, it is an own merits-based accession process. So each country has really the possibility to make a change and be granted EU membership. However, in reality, things are much more complicated. And if we look at the Balkan Express here on the upper right-hand side, there I wrote EU referenda. A number of EU member countries will have referenda on any future new accession. And that, so it is France, it is, I think, also the Netherlands, Ireland. So it might be actually wise to pack all the countries into one train in this case, and have maybe then maximize the chances that such referenda will actually pass through, because I wonder whether, for instance, people in France will be very keen to get Kosovo or Bosnia into the Union, given also the large Muslim populations there. Large in relative size, not in absolute. Now, maybe something in between will happen. I have here an alternative, a two-speed Western Balkans. I have here this turtle and I have here this fish. The fish should hopefully be a bit quicker. These would be the two countries that could be quicker as a group. That would be Montenegro and Macedonia. They actually don't have really a lot of Western Balkan internal problems. I have put this, you noticed it, this blue-white cross at the Macedonian button. That's Greece. So Macedonia has still to solve the name issue with Greece. It is hoped that at the next EU summit in Sofia, that could be maybe a point where Greece and Macedonia could announce that they actually made an agreement, but we don't know that yet. So that could be an easygoing group of countries. It might take more time for the turtle group of countries, particularly because of the two big problem countries here exploding in the middle, Kosovo and Bosnia. To these countries, directly or indirectly, both Albania down there and Serbia are connected. And getting one of them in without the other could cause blackmailing later on when one or the other is in the Union or not. So that is really a problem. And the Commission has also, in all its documents, it announces again and again that there needs to be a legally binding agreement between Serbia and Kosovo before the negotiations end. So that is this agreement sign that I have here between Serbia and Kosovo. And what does it mean, a legally binding agreement? Basically, one can interpret that in the way that there needs to be changes in constitutions, particularly of Serbia. Probably they could write something like Kosovo is an eternal part of Serbia, but not legally binding, or something like that. Yeah? So some sort of this type of agreement will be needed, and that will be needed pretty early. So either this year or next year, if at all a chance would be there for Serbia to join in by 2025. Okay, thanks a lot for your attention.